Welcome, beautiful mamas. I am your host, Shay Harrison. This podcast is a place for Springfield and local surrounding area mamas to share their stories about life, motherhood, and everything in between, completely judgment-free. I am so excited to be able to share these stories with you and give women an opportunity to be heard. So if you're ready to laugh, open your mind, and be part of a supportive sharing community, let's crack on. Today's podcast is proudly brought to you by Bloom Exercise Physiology. Bloom Exercise Physiology are women's health exercise physiologists helping women through conception, pregnancy, and the postnatal period by using exercise in the treatment of pregnancy and postnatal related conditions and supporting you in your return to activity. You can reach them at bloomexercisephysiology@gmail.com. If you would like to feature on one of our podcasts as either a small business or guest to tell your story, you can reach us at Gym and Tonic Movement on Facebook or Instagram. Let's go. Hello, welcome to the podcast. How are you going?
Good, thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. So as always, I'll just get you to introduce yourself and then we will crack on with your story.
So my name's Naomi. I am 35.
Had to think about that then.
Yes, I do.
35.
I live in the Ipswich area. I have a almost 2-year-old daughter, Addie, and my now husband, Reece. We got married in October last year.
Congratulations. Beautiful wedding.
Yes, it was beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I am really excited to share your story because I don't think that it's very common.
No, not at all. I don't know of anyone really locally who...
No.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's common that, like you said, there are probably relationships in like this. So let's go.
So my husband, Reece, has a spinal cord injury, or an SCI, abbreviated. He has a C5, C6 complete spinal cord injury. So that means, but there's all varying degrees of spinal cord injury and everyone's affected very differently depending on where it is and how complete it is. So complete would be pretty much straight through the spinal cord. Incomplete might have affected a little bit of the spinal cord, but his is classified as complete. So pretty much at C5, C6, which is your vertebrae in your neck, is pretty much where the injury happened is pretty much straight through the spinal cord. So from the nerve function at that point in the spinal cord, he has no motor function. So he had this injury well before he met me. He actually said it was 12 years ago the other day, which is crazy.
So he's in a wheelchair.
So he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
He has a electric and a manual chair, but he's mainly in the electric purely for being able to drive around and things like that. I'll talk a bit about that maybe later.
So is he classified as a quadriplegic? Has
so
that been changed now?
No. So he's quadriplegic or tetraplegic is the correct term.
Okay.
But quad being 4 means it affects his 4 limbs.
Yes.
So both legs and both arms.
So is that 3?
No, tetra's the same.
Okay.
Tetra's just the more, I suppose, of scientific.
In depth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that means, so for him, his function and like his sensation stops at about his nipple line.
Yep.
So he has no use of his core or his his lower limbs, his legs, and he has limited use of his upper limbs. So in terms of sensation, he can feel from above his nipple.
Yep.
So he can, if I touch the top of his chest or his shoulders, he can feel that. But because it's quad, he only has limited use of his arms. So his biceps work.
Yep.
His triceps technically don't work. Parts of his shoulders work, but some parts don't.
Yep.
He has like a little bit of upper lat, but no lower lat, because your lats are your big back muscles.
Yep.
He has no dexterity in his hands, so the muscles in his wrists and fingers don't work. So he has no grip, or limited grip. He can't grasp onto things. He can't hold things with his hands. and hence why he's in a wheelchair. He's able to, like in a manual wheelchair, he's able to push a wheelchair. Because you use your triceps more for pushing. They're called triceps. They're called in the spinal cord world. They're called the pushing muscles. So they do a lot of tricep training when they're doing their rehab and exercise programs and things like that. And yeah, so that's kind of in terms of a physical sense, and then in terms of sensation. So yeah, he can't feel anything from his nipples down.
But he can like face and
face.
So kissing and affection, he can.
But he like I said before, every spinal cord injury is really different. Like someone could have the exact same spinal cord level injury. And they'll have slightly different function and sensation to the neck. So he can he gets really weird things, like he'll get a nerve tingly sensation in his face, which tells him he needs to wee.
Oh wow.
Totally. And it's something that he's probably been able to develop over the years, like cottoning on to sensations in the sensations he does get in his body, but like weird things like that. And he can sometimes still get if you're like sometimes it is a bit like subconscious, sort of like if someone touches him on the foot, like the drag across your toes and your toes curl up, he can, not that he can feel that, but he knows it's happening type of thing, and his toes will still curl up. So there's still
like muscle memory,
and just nerve response. So there are still, and spinal cord injuries still, like in this, there's so much research going into it and they're still so unsure, but there are still pathways which seem to want to work but don't properly, and no one knows why yet. And so some really random things happen with the body. And then so because he can't nothing works from below the nipple line, things like bowel function doesn't work, so he has to have assistance with that. With his bladder, he's been able to train his bladder to and people do this all different ways with spinal cord injury. Like people have catheters or self-catheter. He has a indwelling catheter, so he has like a little tube has been put into his abdomen through to his bladder, and so he can basically go to the toilet with this tube, and that's where the little funny tingling sensation comes in. So he's like, I need to go wee. And he can basically go to a normal toilet, granted it's a disabled one with some room, and go to the toilet.
Wow.
With a tube.
That's incredible.
But he's had to train his body up a bit to do that.
Yes, and create those new pathways.
Yeah, and create those new pathways.
Wow, that's so interesting. So I guess how did you mentioned 12 years ago he had an accident.
Yeah, so he was a young 25-year-old boy in the Navy in the Northern Territory. Actually, no, he just discharged. He literally just discharged purely because he wanted to try something else, no other reason. And he was dirt bike riding, motorbike. And he was just one of those fluky things where he was wearing a helmet but hadn't got his proper neck brace yet, and went over a jump, came off his bike as it was coming off the jump, and he landed on his feet, and then a split second later the handlebars of his bike came down and hit him in the head and broke his neck, and there was not a single other scratch on his body or injury, and it was just his neck.
Oh my goodness.
And I think he was in Katherine at the time. So they took him to a hospital close to there, but then they took him straight to Adelaide. Oh no, he was there. And then, so there was a long period of time between proper care. So he's in the middle of nowhere. Close hospital would have had no...
Because I think Katherine's a bear base.
Yeah.
So in Darwin, so there's not a lot out there.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about
then it would have been down to Adelaide. And one of the things with spinal cord injury, and they know this now, is the quicker you release the pressure off the spinal cord, the better your outcomes are.
Okay.
So because he had such a long period of, waiting for a helicopter, and that's probably one of the reasons why his injury is so severe, because he had pressure in his spinal cord for that long. Right. Whereas now they're pretty depending on the situation as well, where you are when it happens. But if something like that happens, they're very on to getting them to like somewhere like the PA, which is specific to spinal cord injury, to get that pressure off and get them into surgery to put stents in and braces and all that sort of stuff.
Right. So the outcomes are better now than they were 12 years ago.
Granted that you're close to a hospital, and that's he was.
There's lots of variables there, obviously.
A lot of variables, yeah. So he was in Adelaide for at least 6 weeks in intensive care. and then he came back up to the PA. So he was originally from Rocky. He was a Rocky boy, but he'd been in the Navy for the last 5 or 6 years. So he'd done his travelling and lived all over and whatnot. And he discharged, and he was planning on going and doing, he was an outdoor guy, so he was planning on going doing helicopter firefighting and all that sort of, he was that sort of person. Wow. And then he had that happen. He was in Adelaide. They brought him back up to Brisbane because it was the closest one to where his parents were. His parents were in Rocky. And he was in the PA for about 6 months, I think. Prince Alfred is where they do all of that, have the big spinal cord injury unit, and brain injury as well. So they do all the rehab and stuff there. He was very, from what he's told me, and also from how he is now, he was very onto researching what to do. So from the get-go, when this happened to him, he was looking into sexual health and fertility and exercise training and rehab, and he was just researching everything so that he could
live his life.
Yeah.
That's really proactive.
He was because the stuff that he tells me that he was doing back then as also a young 25-year-old male. Who, but he was very proactive.
What did he do in the Navy?
He was in gunnery, so...
Yeah, okay. Already wild boys.
Yeah, he was a very, very typical Navy wild boy.
Yeah.
I told him I wouldn't have come near him with a 10-inch pole if I'd met him back then, probably.
Yeah. So he was researching everything.
Yeah, super proactive. And even so when he got out of hospital, he was... I suppose very dedicated to everything in a way, and he says in a way he isolated himself because he was so focused on rehab. He'd sit at home and do exercises with his hands every night, to try and get grip strength ability back, and every day he'd be at the gym, or every day he'd be working at home. He'd spend all his funding on exercise equipment and all that. He was super focused on that. And at the time, so when he had his accident, he was with an ex-partner. Mm-hmm. And they were, they were living together in somewhere near Catherine. And she was with him for about 18 months after the injury. And then they separated. Mm. And then after that separation, he put even more into all of his rehab and things like that. But I guess with spinal cord injury as well I suppose it's a bit different now, but back then, because his level of injury was so severe, there isn't a lot that can change. You can support the body and you can keep everything as strong and healthy as possible, but you can't change the injury itself, and that's where all the research is going at the moment. You can't change you've got a spinal cord injury. It's not like you've torn a bicep and you can repair it. Yeah. The spinal cord is severed or, partially severed, so you can't technically get back movement in your legs. Yeah. Again, there is more research going into it, and there's lots of stuff that is happening where people are starting to be able to walk, but that's, a whole other story. Yeah. So you are kind of... So rehab, in a sense, is... It's more just supporting.
Maintaining?
Yeah, and maintaining.
Yeah. So when he was working through all of these things, he didn't have this hope that...
He always has that hope.
Yeah, okay.
So he's never let go of that.
Yeah, okay.
If he says, if we ever win the lottery and that, we're going over to this university which has this program running and we're going to do this to try this, because he would do anything to get... Not so much walking, using his legs would be amazing, but it's things like bowel function and sexual function and all those sorts of things which... people without injuries, we don't even think about the fact that we have that ability, but when you lose it and then you don't have it anymore and you're having people help you with those things, it's if you could gain those things back, it would make such a difference to quality of life.
Absolutely.
That's
really, I love that he's still so positive and hopeful that there's an outcome. There could be an outcome. There's something out there that's still...
And there is so much research at the moment, but unfortunately it's slow because nothing happens overnight, and you need funding and all that sort of stuff. But there is a lot more coming out, which is promising for at least people in the future.
That's really great. So how did you two meet then? You said that the accident was obviously a while ago.
Yeah, so we've been together 4 years now, and we met at his gym. Mm-hmm. probably, no, we would have met at his gym 5 years ago when he was training there. So there's a gym in Brisbane which specialises in disability. So he goes there and does all these cool, funky training, like he gets up and walks, and
wow,
it's really awesome. And I was finishing off my exercise physiology degree, and my last placement was so it's called Sporting Wheelies in inner city Brisbane. And he was one of the clients there. So we joke about the fact that the first time we met, I was most likely holding his glutes up in a harness while he was walking on a treadmill, because that's what you have to do. You've got to support their whole body while they move their limbs on a treadmill.
Yeah.
And he was a nice guy. He was always a very quiet, fairly quiet, and he was hard to get talking with the students because he was so focused on his training.
Yeah.
So he'd be polite and nice and stuff, I'm also quite a quiet and reserved person. So, we'd be polite and, talk about a bit of chit chat.
And then you're just holding his bum.
And I'm just holding his bum up on a treadmill. And it's because, at this gym, you're very physical with the clients. Like, you're having to help move them around. So, other times I probably would have been holding him up under his armpits while he was doing, so it's very
hands-on.
Very hands-on.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was with a partner at the time anyway, and
it's professional. It's a professional environment, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, now that you're married, it's fun to joke about these things. Yeah.
And then that finished. I finished my degree. Had nothing to do with each other, and then I was single again about a year later, online, and I swiped across and I saw him, and I was like, oh, I know him. Obviously, he's a guy covered in tats in a wheelchair. I was like, that's Reece.
Pretty identifiable. Yeah.
And I remembered him being a really nice guy, and I think it was Bumble. So how does Bumble work? The female has to initiate it, I think, on Bumble.
I'm not too sure.
Anyway, so I messaged him and I was like, hey, how you going? And very quickly he asked me out.
Good.
And it was it's really, it sounds terrible, but you think, oh, hang on a second, this guy's in a wheelchair. And I knew about his injury because I'd worked with him, and I knew like things that he couldn't do, and you all those things go through your head. But anyway, I was pretty open to anything at the time, and he asked.
I love that you have like I can't think of the word. Like you went through that process. Like, hang on. Yeah. Is this something that I want? Because it would be, I can only assume, obviously, be a lot to take on.
Yeah.
And so that's so normal. And I love that you've gone, and you've said that rather than, no, I was open to it, we were good to go. I can't.
And, so I would have been 30, almost 31 or 31.
Yeah, that's right, young.
And so I wasn't on there. I wasn't on online dating for fun. I was on online dating because I wanted to meet someone. I wanted to get married and have kids my entire life. So it wasn't just a play around thing. It was I'm trying to meet someone. Yeah. Obviously not marry the first person I meet.
No. I know what you mean.
I want to date and meet someone that I like.
Serious.
But I think, like, going back to, knowing about his injury, knowing the things that he couldn't do, and that kind of making me think about it, it also helped in a way because having worked with him at the gym and other people with disabilities, I also could see what sort of amazing lives they were still able to lead. Like, I had that better understanding of, they aren't these people who sit at home all day and also don't have any social skills or whatever it is. Like, they are still real people, and they live great lives.
I always remember my mum saying, like, it's not a disabled person, it's a person with a disability. Because they're a person before their disability. Yeah,
exactly. So we went on our first date. Actually, we had our first date here
at the library.
No,
we're in the library, guys. Just
he asked me to meet him so I was living in inner city Brisbane, and I was an inner city Brisbane girl for a very long time, and he lived out in Greater Ipswich, and he asked me to meet him at the Springfield Hotel. No,
the one near the lakes.
No, the one here.
Orion Hotel.
Oh yeah, the Orion Hotel.
Okay.
And so we met here, we met there.
Yeah.
And it was a Sunday afternoon, Sunday sesh, and I could not hear a thing.
It's
and
so
so
loud.
we did those really awkward, like, nodding and, like, did not hear it. Yeah. Anyway, I was super nervous, and he said he was so nervous. Anyway, he asked me he had something happening, like someone was visiting, some family was visiting, and he knew he'd be preoccupied for like 2 weeks, so he really wanted to see me again. So he was pretty, he seemed very keen, but I think it was just he wanted to see me again before there was a big gap. So we had another date not long after. And yeah, it went pretty quickly. And again, those cautions were probably still running through my head. But he was such a nice guy, and it was so easy. And I think it did help that I had met him previously. I knew a bit about him. I knew a bit about his injury. His injury didn't, it wasn't and that goes the same for anyone with an injury or a disability. They're not their injury. So, and even now, I don't, even though, he's in a wheelchair 24/7 apart from at nighttime. I don't see that. He is just Reece to me. And it always has been like that, apart from, those cautionary things we talked about fertility and sex and all that sort of stuff really early on.
You've got to.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had those conversations, but everything still felt really like
natural.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what you want when you meet someone that
just clicks.
It clicks, yeah. And it clicked really quickly, and yeah. I'm trying to think what happened next. We dated for a bit, but then we were pretty official. I don't know. Actually, because we met we had our first date in November, and I think we were pretty official by Christmas time.
Wow. So what was it? Obviously, you had an understanding of his injuries and everything, but what was it about him that was it just this feeling? Did he make you laugh? Did he?
He's just such a calm person, and I'm not.
Yes.
Well, I always think I'm calm, but I'm not really.
No. Yeah. No. Well, I don't mean I don't know you, but I understand what you're saying. Yes.
He's got this really just calmness about him, which I think goes really well with someone who's more anxious, stressy,
highly strung.
I'm
highly strung as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And he just, for what he's been through, he was so positive, not in this sense in that I'm going to heal myself and I'm going to be better and the world is amazing, just positive in that I can still do this, we can still do that. And positive just about general life stuff, like me stressing out about stupid shit. He's just it's all right, do it differently the next day, or whatever it is. He's just a calm person. Yeah, irrespective of his injury, he's just a nice, calm person. And he's made me laugh, very dad jokey.
Yeah.
And just, I just felt really relaxed around him.
Yeah, yeah.
Which was nice.
That's lovely.
Yeah. And he was a good kisser.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that was...
Obviously that above neck sensation is still present.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. So, as you've said, you obviously were official, and then you've had a baby.
Yes.
So how long were you together?
We weren't even together. So we spoke about that sort of stuff really early on, and I think he wanted to as well, because he wanted to put all the cards on the table.
Are you the same age?
He's a year older.
Oh yeah, near enough. Yeah.
And he was in the same situation as me. Always wanted to, have a family. Probably not so much have to get married, but he wanted a partner, and always wanted to have kids. And again, like I said, he'd done all the research when he'd had his injury about what the possibilities and whatnot. So, do you want me to go into too much information about how things work with him?
As much as you're willing to share. I find this also interesting. I read this thing the other day that my personality type, I want to learn. I want to know everything. And some people find that I'm being nosy, but it's not. I'm just curious.
It's good for people to have an understanding.
Yeah.
And like I said, so everyone with a spinal cord injury is very different, and that's the same for sexual health as well. So, he's going to kill me for saying this, but for Reece, he has the ability to get an erection. So there are still nerve signals and whatnot which allow him to do that, but he can't ejaculate with sex.
Okay.
But he can ejaculate with basically they are medical grade vibrators.
Oh, okay.
So they're things they're medical tools. They're not, well, you do buy them online, but they're not, just from a sex shop. They are medical grade.
Yeah.
So he has the ability to do that. And
that's really cool. I love that. This has obviously been not a problem. I shouldn't an obstacle for years, that these things have been thought of. It's not just, oh, well, chip salad, too bad.
But in saying that, no one very few professionals educate people with spinal cord injury about these things. So he has had to do all this research himself.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot more information from the States about it.
Yeah.
But in Australia...
Is that where these medical devices have come from?
So we had to order it from the States.
Wow.
Yeah. So he has the ability to do that, and that also gives him pleasure. So he still feels like he's having... He says it's not the same as pre-injury, but it still feels like he's having an orgasm, basically.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's not as easy as just every day you do. It takes time and, practice and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
So he has the ability to do that. So technically we thought we could still conceive naturally, but like a turkey basting sort of way. Mm-hmm. So we started talking about this about 10 months into our relationship, in terms of, okay, we're 32, 33, we would like to have a kid. This could take us longer because of our situation.
Yeah.
Why don't we start trying?
Yeah.
And so we did try that a little bit, and it wasn't very successful. It also, like I said, it's time consuming, so it's not, it's not romantic, and it's not easy, quick to do. So, in terms of, you've got your ovulation window and whatnot, so you've got to have the right time, and it's not just he can jump into bed. I've got to get him into bed and all those sorts of things. So it was a little bit frustrating. So let's look into IVF straight away, because again, that whole process could take a while, so we'll start looking into it. So we started looking into that IVF 14 months into our relationship.
Yep.
And that was 2020, when did COVID hit? 2019.
Yeah, I think 2020 was when we went into lockdown in April.
Yeah.
Because Callie was born in December, and then we went into lockdown the next year. So I think it started in China.
So Addie was born 2021. So start of 2020 was when we started the IVF process. Mm-hmm. And as stressful as all of that is, we were very lucky, and it did go fairly smoothly, apart from the April lockdown when I just had my egg retrieval. And we got one embryo. Which again, that whole process is super stressful. They tell you how many eggs you've got, and
that they have harvested,
and then only one fertilized. No, sorry, a couple of fertilized, but then we only got the one embryo at the end, one good embryo, I suppose.
Yeah.
And we were going to do a embryo transfer my next cycle, because my body needed a rest because it had been so full on. And then we went into lockdown, and our embryo was locked away from us, and that was absolutely horrible, because it's just that kind of disconnect. There was a process, and right, this day that happened, and then everything shut down, and you're just it's really weird. We can't actually access our embryo. Anyway, it all worked out.
Because wasn't it as well at the beginning of lockdown, you could see a doctor for medical procedures, but IVF was not included in that list?
It kind of chopped and changed really frequently throughout that year, I think.
Yeah.
But that happened to be the one where, IVF clinics were pretty much shut down unless you had a pretty severe medical reason to continue the process or start the I don't think they're letting anyone start the process either, actually.
Yeah, okay. How devastating.
But in saying that, I was so stressed that my cycle lengthened itself.
Yeah.
And the doors opened to the clinic, and I was right on the right day to have a transfer, basically. And so I went in and I had transfer, and that was Addie.
Wow.
So as stressful as it was super quick. We were started IVF in January. We're this could take us a while.
Yeah.
And I was pregnant by May.
Wow.
April, May. Yeah.
That's amazing. And do you think when she was just an embryo, do you think, oh my goodness, that was my little baby just sitting in a little dish?
Yeah.
We couldn't access her, or not like that?
It's a hard concept. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. I've not gone through IVF, so I'm just curious.
It's yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was just weird. It was hard.
Yeah.
Weird feeling.
Yeah.
But so that was Addie.
That's incredible. She's so cute. That hair, man.
Yeah.
When she was really small, she had so much hair.
Well, she still does. Her hair's almost down to her bum now.
Wow, and she's not even two.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
Pregnant with Addie.
Yeah.
Pregnancy was fairly smooth. Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. And then coming up to labour, birth and all that sort of stuff, I was quite stressed about Reece not being able to, I should have gone into this before. So with Reece's inability to use his bowels independently, he has a carer every morning which assists him with what they call manual bowel therapy.
Yep.
And he has to do that every day. And again, everyone with an injury is different. So some people do it every day, every second day, every third day, but his routine is every day to make sure that he basically doesn't poo himself during the day.
Yep.
So every morning he is on the toilet for a long period of time with a support worker helping him, assisting him, and that has to happen pretty much. Well, it's never not happened really.
Yeah. Okay.
So
even through COVID.
Yep. So they still were allowed to come in. And again, different situations. Some people have their partners do it or family members. Reece has always wanted to keep that side of his life very much separate from his, like, so his mum, he lived with his mum for a long period of time, so he's never let his mum do it. He's never wants me to do it. There might be a time when that comes, but for
keep the
now,
romance alive.
Yeah, he likes to keep that very separate.
You were going into labour?
Yes. So in terms of preparing for that, and, I didn't want to be induced and that sort of thing.
Yes.
So it was like, well, what if I'm about to have a baby and he's sitting on the toilet and he literally has to be there? Like, you can't get him on or off any quicker. It has to happen. So that was a bit of a stress. Not a stress, but just a worry, like, because I really wanted him to be there. And not just for me, but for him as well. Like, it's his experience and his baby as well.
Did you birth at a hospital?
Yes, so I was at Ipswich Hospital, and it ended up...
So I was just going to say, was there a concern about also getting him to the
hospital?
That
was one of the things that we... so Reece can drive.
Okay, yep.
So he was able to drive himself there. But again, depending on the time of day, we're like, how is he going to get there and whatnot? It was one of the things we discussed with the midwives a lot, was things like, what if it ended up in emergency C-section? Can we get his, is he going to be allowed in the room because he's got, equipment which isn't covered and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
So they had discussions with the surgical team and all that. So they were amazing with that. So everyone knew that he was a quad and wheelchair, and that when I came in, he'd be in there. They were going to give us the biggest birthing suite, or if it was a C-section they were going to make sure that he was gowned up and could come in unless, it was under a general, all that sort of stuff. We planned all that, and that put my mind at ease a bit. And in the end, I was induced. But they were amazing. I had gone in overnight, and he was due to come in early the next morning, but they were in the middle of the night. They're like, hang on a second, we really want to induce you properly now because, you've got meconium in your waters and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But they were like, but we know Reece isn't coming into the morning. We understand your situation. If Bub's all okay, I'll let you wait till the morning. And she was fine, which is great. So there was super. I mean, who knows what would have happened if she wasn't all right? But everything did go really smoothly, apart from the fact that the birth was pretty didn't go how I wanted to. The fact that Reece was able to be there went perfectly. So everyone on the team knew that he was coming in.
Yeah.
All the doctors knew, all the midwives knew. Even when they swapped shifts, they knew who he was and the situation. So they moved things out of the way so he could be next to me, and that they were amazing with that.
That's incredible.
And the fact that I was induced, as horrible as it was, worked to our favour in that he was there at the right time. He was able to be there. I laboured all through the day. She was born at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so it was perfect for him. He was there the whole time.
Yeah.
And so then we had a newborn.
Yeah.
And I suppose, as during the pregnancy, we tried to mentally prepare ourselves a little bit, as much as you can for having a baby, which is pretty hard.
Yes.
One of his biggest fears was always that he wouldn't be able to do what he wanted to do as a parent. He always saw himself as a very hands-on parent. Like I said, was a very active guy. So, he wanted to be able to play sport with his kids. And he knew those things that would come up later on as a parent would be really hard for him. The newborn stage actually wasn't too bad. So he's able to, like I said at the start, he can use his biceps. So if you can imagine holding a little baby, that's mainly bicep.
Yeah.
So he was able to, we'd have like cushions on his lap and he could hold her. And because he's in an electric wheelchair, he can change his angle and seat. So he's leaning back a bit so it's more supported and all those sorts of things. He's got an armrest so his arm would be supported. So newborn was fairly okay, apart from the lack of sleep and whatnot. He was still able to help out a bit. He was also, because it was COVID times, he was working from home, so he was there, like, and he's still working from home, so that's been amazing. He's been there the whole time of her growing up.
Do you have family support?
So yeah, his mum's really close, like down the street.
Awesome.
And my parents are 2 hours away, so not too far.
Yeah.
As she started to move more, it was a bit trickier.
Yeah.
But again, we kind of just figured out ways to, like, we use different carriers. So we've got these hilarious photos of Addie, like, strapped to him in an ergo with her face out, like facing forward. So she would sit, we'd go shopping, and I was able to, the ergo would extend enough that I could wrap it around his wheelchair, so it was super secure. And she'd sit in the front, and he'd wheel around the shops with her sitting in the front of the ergo. So things like that.
Did all that hair get in his face?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. So we'd have like this spiky hair up in his nose and his mouth.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so we did things like that. We pretty soon realised that, so his wheelchair has like for him to be able to drive, it has like this little supportive, we call it a wing, so it like sits up and it locks his arm in on, so if you can think of an arm, like an armchair, you've got your arm on there, and it's like a little wing on the side which keeps your arm in.
From sliding off?
Yeah. So Addie, from like 3 or 4 months, and because she was such a big baby as well and fairly strong, she could sit in on the armchair with the wing up, and he'd have his arm around her a little bit, and she'd be wedged in, and she'd just sit there. And again, they'd go around the house or the shopping centre, and she'd be like locked in there. And then that's how he would, I suppose, hold her and look after her. It was tricky that he couldn't like soothe her or calm her because he couldn't really like rock or walk. He did try wheeling her around a bit, but that just wasn't enough sometimes. So that was tricky. So like she wouldn't calm down, and he would have to give her to me. So we just kind of figured out, ways to do things as we went. And I'm sure it's been a lot harder for him because it hasn't bothered me if I've had to go and get her or pick her up or whatever, but it's bothered him because he wants to be able to do that. Night times are hard, and they always have been, because it has been me that always has to get up or soothe or calm her. And, lots of, situations and families are like that anyway. Yeah. And some babies will only go to mum, and Addie's always been like that anyway. So irrespective of his injury, I think she would have been like that.
A mummy's girl
no matter what. But, when we've had really rough nights, and it has always been me getting up with her in the morning because he takes 3 hours to get up. Yeah. Those things are hard for him and hard for me. Like, it's probably more that I'm just, I get so fatigued from it, and then then I'm grumpy and moody. So he's upset that he couldn't help me in the first place, and then not annoyed, but upset that now then I'm tired or whatever. Grumpy. So those are the things which have been hard. Yeah. And now that she's, walking around and stuff, he is able to interact with her a lot more. Like, they can go around the house or go around the yard and do things. Yeah. Again, it's not as much as he wants to do, and I'm sure that is so much harder for him than I probably realise or can understand, that he can't just kick a ball with her or... Yeah. But there are, ways that he's figured out how to do stuff with her. And now, so instead of sitting on the side of the wheelchair, she sits on the feet of his wheelchair and zooms around on there. That's so cute. She gets to do cool, fun things like that.
That lots of children are never going to experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah, so that's where... so she's almost 2 now. Yeah. And we're still sleep deprived and... Very good. Maybe thinking about another one, but... Yeah. Now that we're kind of getting a little bit of sleep, we might just see
the independence.
Yeah.
Yeah, you lose it all over again. Yeah. That was really tough going from 1 to 2, I found. But worth it if you do decide to go down that route. And if not, that's incredible. I am just so blown away with Reece's resilience, but yours as well. I think that it's such a big... It's probably not. It, like you said, you just connected with him, but I don't think that there would be hundreds of people.
No, and that's the other thing is, like, when we first started... Even just dating, I started looking for different people's stories and whatnot. And there is a bit out there, but there's not a lot. Again, like I said, more in the States than there is here. Yeah. And I know a couple of families who are in a similar situation, but it's not spoken about a lot because it is, it is rarer. But yeah, it's, our life is trickier in some ways than others, but we also, have other things which are come easier to us than, because we do have so much support.
Yes.
We get help around the house because of his disability and all those sorts of things. So, which, makes things easier in one way, but harder in others.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.